My boyfriend gave me an ultimatum. Hand over your savings or stop calling yourself his woman. I answered, understood, and ended the relationship on the spot and moved on with my life. My name is Francesca M. Guidry. I am 34 years old. I work in project management for a construction firm and live in a mid-sized city in the Pacific Northwest. My days are structured and repetitive by choice. Early mornings, long hours, evenings at home. I save aggressively and avoid unnecessary risk because I grew up watching money problems destroy women in my family. My boyfriend's name is Daniel Mercer. He is 31. We had been together just over 2 years and did not live together, though he spent most weekends at my place. We did not share accounts, no joint purchases, no kids, clean separation on paper, even if the relationship felt emotionally tangled. When we first met, Daniel was confident and sharp. He spoke quickly, knew what he wanted, liked to test people. I mistook that for strength. Over time, it became something else. He liked control, but never directly. It always came dressed as standards, expectations, or what a real woman would do. Money was always a quiet undercurrent. He made decent money, but spent like it was temporary. I made more and saved most of it. He noticed. At first, he joked, called me rigid, said I lived like someone preparing for divorce before marriage. I laughed it off because it felt harmless. 6 months ago, the jokes stopped being jokes. He started talking about shared futures in a very specific way. Upgrades, better places, trips, investments he had ideas about. Anytime I asked how he planned to contribute, he'd say couples don't nickel and dime each other. Anytime I said I wasn't comfortable funding everything, he'd say I was afraid of intimacy. Last week, it finally came to a head. We were sitting in my kitchen after dinner. He was irritated about something unrelated and scrolling on his phone. Out of nowhere, he said he was tired of feeling like he was dating a woman who didn't fully claim him. I asked what that meant. He looked at me and said if I wanted to call myself his woman, I needed to hand over my savings so we could build something together. Otherwise, I should stop pretending I was serious. It wasn't framed as a discussion. It was an ultimatum. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I said, understood. And that's where everything changed. I stood up and started clearing the table. Daniel was still sitting there, arms crossed, watching me like he expected the silence to make me cave. He asked if I was seriously just going to ignore what he said. I told him I heard him perfectly. Then I told him the relationship was over. He laughed at first. Not amused laughter. Dismissive laughter. The kind he used whenever he thought I was bluffing. He said I was being dramatic and that I needed to sit back down so we could talk like adults. I didn't sit. I walked into the bedroom and grabbed the overnight bag he always kept there. The one he never fully unpacked but treated like a permanent fixture. I opened it and started putting his things inside. Clothes, charger, the razor he left on my sink like he owned the place. That's when his tone changed. He followed me down the hall, asking what I thought I was doing. I told him calmly that he gave me a choice, and I answered. I wasn't handing over my savings, and I wasn't pretending to be anything for him, so he needed to leave. He said I couldn't just kick him out. He said it was late. He said he drove here. He said real women don't throw their men out over a disagreement. I told him real women don't get extorted by their boyfriends. That set him off. He started listing everything he thought he brought to my life. His time, his energy, his protection. He said I was selfish. He said I was cold. He said any man would expect access to his woman's money if she was serious. I zipped the bag and handed it to him. I opened the front door and stood there quietly holding it open. I didn't yell. I didn't insult him. I didn't argue point by point. I just waited. The lack of reaction enraged him more than anything else. He accused me of being heartless. He accused me of wasting his time. He said I would regret this and come crawling back once I realized how hard it was to find a man like him. I told him to take care of himself. He stood there for a long moment like he expected me to stop him. When I didn't, he grabbed the bag out of my hand and stormed out, muttering under his breath. I closed the door, locked it, leaned against it for a second. My phone buzzed immediately. A text from him that said, "You're making a huge mistake." I didn't reply. Instead, I went back to the kitchen to finish cleaning up dinner like nothing had happened. That was the night my life got a lot quieter. I woke up the next morning to 32 notifications, missed calls, voicemails, texts that bounced between rage and panic so fast it almost felt scripted. The first few accused me of overreacting. The next few accused me of being manipulative. By the end of the thread, he was bargaining, asking if we could just talk like adults and reset. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I did something boring. I went to work. That probably sounds trivial, but it mattered. Daniel thrived on emotional urgency. Crisis. Big moments. Me, clocking in like it was any other Tuesday, robbed the situation of oxygen. Around noon, I checked my phone once. He had switched tactics. Now he was texting about how he felt used, how he had invested 2 years of his life in me, how he couldn't believe I threw him out instead of trying to compromise. That word again. Compromise. What he meant by compromise was me giving in after enough pressure. I replied once and only once. I told him the relationship was over and not to contact me again. He responded immediately. Paragraphs, accusations. He said I proved I was never a real woman. He said, real women support their men. He said, money is just money, and you're choosing numbers over love. He ended with, if you don't unblock me right now, don't ever expect to hear from me again. I blocked him. That afternoon, my older sister texted me asking what happened. Daniel had already called her crying, telling her I kicked him out and abandoned him over a misunderstanding. I told my sister the truth in 3 sentences. Ultimatum, savings, relationship ended. She replied with 1 word. Good. When I got home that evening, the apartment felt different. Not empty, neutral, like it finally belonged to me again. No tension hanging in the air, no commentary, no subtle digs disguised as jokes. I cooked dinner, ate quietly, cleaned up. Later, while taking out the trash, I noticed something small but telling. Daniel had left one of his cufflinks on the counter, something he definitely would have noticed if he hadn't been so confident I'd chase him. I threw it away. That night, he tried again through email. New account. Same message. He said he didn't mean the ultimatum literally. He said I misunderstood. He said couples test each other sometimes to see how committed they are. That was when it fully clicked. He wasn't angry that I said no. He was angry that his leverage didn't work. And once I understood that, there was nothing left to debate. 2 days passed before Daniel showed up again. This time, he didn't text first. He didn't call. He just appeared outside my building right as I was getting home from work, standing by the entrance like he still had a claim to the place. Same jacket, same posture. Arms folded tight, jaw set, already rehearsing whatever speech he planned to deliver. He said we needed to talk. I told him we didn't. That set him off immediately. He said I couldn't just end things like that. He said adults don't throw away relationships over one bad conversation. He said I owed him a discussion because he had invested time in me. I told him time spent doesn't turn extortion into commitment. He snapped back that I was twisting his words again, that he never wanted my savings for himself. He said he wanted security. He wanted proof I was serious. He wanted to know he wasn't wasting his prime years on a woman who would never fully step up. I asked him why stepping up only ever involved my money. He ignored the question and switched tactics. He said I embarrassed him. He said kicking him out made me look unstable. He said he told his friends what I did, and they were shocked. He emphasized that word like it was supposed to shame me. I told him I didn't care what his friends thought. That seemed to surprise him. He accused me of changing. Said I'd become cold and transactional. Said the woman he fell for would never choose money over love. I told him the woman he fell for would never tolerate being threatened. People started walking past us. He lowered his voice but got sharper. He said if I didn't fix this now, I would regret it. He said men talk. He said my reputation would take a hit. He said no man would feel safe with a woman who throws her boyfriend out. I told him he was free to leave whenever he wanted, and he was free to tell whatever story helped him sleep at night. He stood there staring at me, clearly waiting for something. An apology, a crack, any sign that the pressure was working. When it didn't come, he scoffed and said, fine. He said I'd come crawling back once I realized how hard dating was in your 30s. I told him not to come back again. He laughed like I was bluffing and walked away. I went upstairs, locked my door, and added his name to the building's do not admit list. That was the moment I stopped thinking of this as a breakup. It was an extraction. Daniel didn't come back in person after that, but he didn't disappear either. He went digital. By the next morning, mutual friends started reaching out with carefully worded messages. Just checking in. Hope you're okay. Daniel's really hurt. Each one followed the same arc. Concern first, pressure second. They all wanted to know if I was really sure I wanted to end things over money. I corrected them calmly. I told them it wasn't about money. It was about an ultimatum. I told them anyone who threatens a relationship to gain access to someone else's savings is not asking for partnership. They're asking for control. Some people backed off immediately. A few went quiet. One friend admitted Daniel had been complaining for months that I was holding out on him financially and that he deserved more. That confirmed everything. Daniel tried another angle that afternoon. He emailed me a long message titled Clarity. In it, he reframed the ultimatum as a test. He said he needed to know I'd choose us over fear. He said strong couples share everything. He said my reaction proved I wasn't emotionally mature enough for a real future. He ended it by saying he was willing to forgive me if I apologized, and showed I was serious by opening up financially. I laughed out loud reading that, not because it was funny, because it was revealing. He genuinely believed he still had leverage. I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to a folder labeled Done and blocked the address. That evening, I did something I'd been putting off for months. I logged into my bank accounts and updated beneficiaries. I reviewed my savings plan. I scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor I'd been meaning to call anyway, not because of him, but because I could finally make decisions without someone hovering over them. Later that night, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. The voicemail was Daniel crying now. No anger, no threats, just disbelief. He said he never thought I'd actually walk away. He said he thought I'd push back a little and then give in, like always. That last sentence stuck with me. Like always. I blocked the number. That was the moment I understood something important. The ultimatum wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy that finally failed. And once it failed, there was nothing left for the relationship to stand on. A week went by before Daniel tried one last escalation. He showed up at my work, not inside. In the parking lot, right after my shift ended. I saw him leaning against his car like this was some dramatic movie moment and not a real workplace with cameras and policies. He smiled when he saw me like we were about to have a reconciliation scene. I kept walking. He called my name louder this time and followed me a few steps, saying we needed closure. That word again. Closure. The word people use when they want one more chance to regain control of the narrative. I turned and told him calmly that this was inappropriate and he needed to leave. I said if he came back again, I would involve security. His smile vanished instantly. He said I was heartless. He said he couldn't believe I was choosing money over him. He said any man would expect his woman to prove commitment. He said I was selfish and afraid to invest in a future. I told him the future doesn't start with threats. That was when he crossed the line. He said if I didn't talk to him, he would tell people I financially abused him. He said he'd say I led him on, promised things, and then pulled the rug out. He said people would believe him. I didn't raise my voice. I told him to do whatever he needed to do and walked away. That was the last time I saw him in person. That night, I emailed HR just in case and documented the encounter. I also sent a brief message to a lawyer friend asking what my options were if harassment continued. Not because I wanted to escalate, but because I wanted the situation contained. The next day, Daniel posted vague statements online about betrayal and manipulation. Comments poured in, some sympathetic, some skeptical. A few people asked questions he didn't answer. I didn't respond. I noticed something interesting during this phase. The more calm and consistent I stayed, the more erratic he looked by comparison. He needed reaction. Without it, his story lost coherence. By the end of the week, the post stopped. Silence replaced noise. And in that silence, I realized how much of my energy had been spent managing someone else's expectations instead of living my own life. That realization mattered more than any argument we ever had. Once the noise stopped, something else crept in. Doubt from other people, not from me, from the outside. A couple of friends asked if I was okay. Then they asked if I was sure I hadn't been too harsh. They said Daniel could be intense, but meant well. They said money can make people say things they don't fully mean. The implication was clear. I should have softened it. I should have negotiated. I listened and didn't argue. What I noticed was that none of them questioned the ultimatum itself. They questioned my refusal to play along with it. That was telling. Daniel resurfaced indirectly a few days later through a mutual friend. He wanted to know if I had cooled off. He said he was willing to compromise now. He said maybe he had phrased things badly, but his intentions were good. He said he didn't actually want all of my savings, just access, transparency, a gesture. I told the friend to pass along one message. Ultimatums don't get renegotiated after they fail. That apparently landed harder than anything else I'd said so far. According to the friend, Daniel was furious. Not sad, not reflective. Furious. He said I was punishing him for being honest. He said women like me only care about control. He said I'd end up alone because no man wants a woman who refuses to provide security. I let it go. That weekend, I did something small but symbolic. I went through my apartment and removed everything that reminded me of him. Not dramatically, just practically. Photos deleted, gifts boxed up. I didn't throw them away. I donated what I could. The rest went in storage. The space changed immediately, not emotionally, physically. Less clutter, fewer objects that came with commentary. It felt like breathing room. That night, I realized something I hadn't fully articulated before. Daniel didn't want partnership. He wanted access without accountability. He wanted security without limits. And he framed entitlement as commitment, so I'd feel guilty resisting it. Once I saw that clearly, there was no version of the relationship worth saving. The ultimatum wasn't the end. It was the reveal. And once something reveals itself that cleanly, the only logical move is to step away and keep going. About 2 weeks after everything went quiet, I heard through someone else that Daniel was telling a new version of the story. In this one, the ultimatum never happened. According to him, we broke up because I was emotionally unavailable and obsessed with money. He said I refused to plan a future. He said he finally stood up for himself and I couldn't handle it. It was a cleaner narrative, one where he was strong and wronged instead of reckless. I didn't correct it. People who mattered already knew me well enough to see the gaps. People who didn't were never going to hear the truth anyway. I stopped treating reputation like something I had to manage. What did surprise me was how fast he tried to replace the relationship. A mutual friend mentioned he was suddenly dating again, very publicly. Posts about standards, about knowing his worth, about not settling for women who are afraid to invest. The captions were pointed enough that no one missed the target. I scrolled past them without reacting. Instead, I noticed how calm my days had become. No more financial arguments disguised as philosophical debates, no more hints, no more pressure to prove myself through spending. I paid my bills, invested as planned, slept without that constant low-level tension I had normalized for years. One evening, I ran into someone who knew both of us. They asked if I was okay now that Daniel had moved on so fast. I said I was fine and meant it. Moving on quickly is usually a sign of avoiding reflection, not healing. That night, I went back through old messages for the first time in a while, not to relive them, to understand the pattern. The jokes about my savings, the digs about being cold, the way every disagreement ended with him questioning my femininity, suggesting a real woman would be more generous, more trusting, less guarded. It was all there. I just hadn't wanted to label it. The ultimatum wasn't a sudden escalation. It was the natural conclusion of months of pressure. He didn't wake up one day and demand my savings. He worked toward that moment expecting compliance. And when compliance didn't come, he didn't adjust. He detonated, seeing it laid out that clearly erased any lingering doubt. I hadn't overreacted. I had simply stopped playing a role I was never meant to accept. By the end of that week, his name stopped coming up at all. Life didn't feel exciting. It felt stable. And after what I had just stepped out of, stability felt like a win. The last time Daniel tried to pull me back in, it was subtle. No surprise appearances, no dramatic speeches in parking lots, just a mutual friend mentioning almost casually that Daniel had been asking about me. Not how I was doing, whether I was dating yet, whether I seemed happy, whether I regretted anything. That told me everything. He didn't miss me. He missed the leverage. Apparently, he'd been telling people he expected me to reach out eventually. That women like me always do once the shock wears off. That I'd realize he was right about money and commitment and come back ready to prove it. Weeks passed. I didn't reach out. I started dating again slowly and without announcing it. Coffee dates. Conversations without power games. No tests. No ultimatums disguised as standards. I noticed how easy things felt when expectations were spoken plainly instead of implied and enforced through guilt. One night, I got a message request from an account with no profile picture. It was Daniel. A new number. He said he hoped I was well. He said he'd been doing a lot of thinking. He said maybe we both made mistakes. He said he didn't mean the ultimatum the way it came out. He said he just wanted reassurance and security. He asked if we could talk like adults now that emotions had cooled. I stared at the message for a long time, not because I was tempted, because I was struck by how familiar the script felt. Reframing, softening, inviting me back into a conversation where he could slowly reset the terms. There was no apology, no ownership, just a softer version of the same request. I replied with one sentence, "I'm not interested in reopening this." Then I blocked the account. No follow-up, no explanation, no debate. After that, nothing. No more messages, no more indirect pressure, no more stories aimed in my direction. The chapter closed not with drama, with disinterest. And that felt right, because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And I had finally reached it. It has been several months since that night in my kitchen, and nothing dramatic followed. No surprise apology, no grand realization on his part, no moment where he admitted he crossed the line. Real life doesn't give you those clean endings. It just moves forward once you stop feeding the conflict. Daniel is gone from my day-to-day life completely now. I don't hear about him anymore. Mutual friends stopped updating me once they realized I wasn't waiting for news. His name doesn't trigger anything when it comes up in passing. It's just information, like hearing about someone you used to work with. What changed most wasn't my finances or my routines. It was my tolerance. I no longer negotiate my boundaries. I don't explain why an ultimatum is unacceptable. I don't argue with someone who thinks commitment means control or that love is proven through financial surrender. If someone shows me who they are that clearly, I take them at their word and act accordingly. Looking back, the ultimatum wasn't about money. It was about power. He wanted to know if he could threaten my identity as a woman to get what he wanted. He wanted to see if I would panic, overcorrect, and hand over control to keep the relationship intact. He expected resistance followed by surrender. Instead, he got agreement and an ending. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult him. I didn't try to win the argument. I simply opted out of the situation entirely and went on with my life. That choice did more than any confrontation ever could. My life now is quieter, steadier, free of constant tests. The savings he wanted access to are still mine. More importantly, so is my peace. If there's any takeaway here, it's this. When someone ties your worth to compliance, believe them the first time. And when someone gives you an ultimatum meant to corner you, remember that walking away is also an answer. It just happens to be the one that ends the game entirely.